Well, good morning, everyone. You may have noticed I had a slight hiccup there, and Emily is correct. I have earned a demerit. Hopefully, those are redeemable for fabulous prizes. Um, but I want to first welcome everyone and thank you all for, starting off your day learning with me. Today, we are going to be here to learn about. There we go. We are here to learn about being a space administrator in Confluence, which is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which I will talk quite a bit about as we go about why I think that's near and dear to my heart. But we'll also be digging into specific parts about it, like why it's so important to be a space admin, what they do, and why they're kind of really underutilized, as far as I can tell. All right, we've got some folks. Great on a curve. Thank you, Emily. I appreciate that. Folks from Ireland, Iceland, the tundra of Indiana, Philly. I am in the Bay Area of California. It is unfortunately not as warm as I tend to like it, but I'll take what I can get. I'm going to make a slight adjustment here, and unfortunately my happy fun looks like my usual circle is not going to work with me today. So, I apologize, you're going to have to be stuck with me in a square. But we are, and Belgium, love it. But we're going to jump in. As usual, we're just going to start off with some slides, just so we all understand what we're talking about, but also who this person is and why you're listening to me. My name is Rob. Some of you have been in here before. I've had a career in different parts of IT. I started off as the help desk worker, bringing you your monitor and installing it, but quickly got onto project work. But my entire time working on projects in information technology showed me that documentation and knowledge and collaboration is crucial to everything. I haven't had a job yet where I haven't had to document something and share it with people. I haven't had a job yet where I'm not working with other people. Carl, glad you're here, and thank you. I appreciate that. And I can imagine it's a little bit cooler there in Minnesota. Philippines, Noreen, welcome. I started using Confluence 9 or 10 years ago. I forget exactly. And the story I always tell, which unfortunately a lot of people also have, is the entirety of my training was someone pointing at the login and saying, that's how you log in. I had no other information about Confluence. I kind of had to figure it out as I go. And that's exactly why I put these courses together. When I first became a space admin, it was really exciting. And I'll share a few more stories about that. But I didn't know anything about it other than, hey, I have a new menu and I can do things. I have a lot of online learning as well. You're listening to me here, and I really appreciate that because it helps me build my skills, but also lets me interact with others like yourselves so you can build your skills. It was not Confluence Server. I'm pretty sure it was Cloud. Most of my experience has been in Cloud with a brief foray into DC. I like YouTube because a lot of us from everywhere can jump on it. We've got the Philippines, we've got Belgium, we've got other places. That said, it has some challenges. It's not interactive in the same way if we were in a room together. So please use the chat. A lot of you have already found it. Please share information. Please share your questions. You'll see me and my friends from Appmanville put in questions. If it's a question, how comfortable are you? You can put a 1 for not comfortable, all the way up to a 5, super comfortable. But we'll also have other questions asking you things like, what's your favorite feature, other things, just to kind of see what you all think. Also, please interact with each other. I've had some of these where the chat starts chatting with other people, which is really great to see, because supporting each other and learning from each other is key to learning. That's how I have learned a lot of what I know. So please, support each other and back each other up or answer each other's questions as best you can. Of course, please subscribe and like. That really helps us. We're planning one of these almost every Thursday at 6 a.m. Pacific time. That's, I think, 2 p.m. Greenwich Mean or UTC. So the more feedback we get from you on what we should be doing, the more helpful it is. But please use that chat to let us know what's up. A quick agenda, just so we all can see what's going on. Asha, welcome from India. Glad to have you here. We're going to cover some concepts, kind of some background ideas around what Confluence is or what being a space admin is, just so we all understand some basic ideas. And again, this is important because I don't know what you all know. So I have to assume we start from almost zero and then we build up. So we'll dig into some of those, and then we're going to get hands-on. I have a Confluence Cloud Premium site, so we're going to jump into that. I will do my best to call out things that are different in Confluence Cloud Premium compared to, say, India. Excuse me. I was looking at the chat. I will do my best to call out things that are different between Confluence Cloud Premium and, say, Data Center or Standard. But if you have a question, hey, Rob, I don't have that feature. Hey, is this in Standard or Free or DC? Use that chat. And so our first question is just, how familiar are you with what a space administrator can do? 1, you have no clue. 5, you're very comfortable. And that doesn't mean you know everything. It just means you're comfortable with it. All right, here we go with our first informational slide. So the first thing to think about a Confluence is a space. Now, Confluence itself, I think of like a library or a garden. It has sections within it, but the library itself is our copy of Confluence. And that's what you get when you first install it, or that's what you log into when you go to your organization. But within that instance, there are spaces. There are rooms of the library. There are parts of the garden, and each space can be different. They're used mainly for sorting information, and they typically get broken up by project team or department or process or some other kind of logical group of similar information. And again, this is something I didn't know. I just clicked on, oh, that's the IT. It just says information technology, and that's the information I want. But spaces are our kind of largest level unit for organizing information for most groups. Some groups will actually organize by instance, so their R&D department may have their own copy of Confluence. But for the purpose of this course, most organizations have one version of Confluence or one instance, and within that, they have many spaces. I don't believe there's a limit to the number of spaces. It's more about how we will choose to organize them. Liz mentioned a 0.3 confidence. You always forget 1 permission to user and 1 org admin. Okay, fair. I'm seeing a couple of 2s, a 4 with an exclamation point, Carl. Is that like a 4 plus? I appreciate the folks who are comfortable saying a 1 or a 2. It can be hard to say, I don't know. But that does help me. That makes it easier for me to engage and make sure you get what you need. So if I'm talking about something that you don't understand or use a term you're not familiar with, please call me out in the chat. I do my best not to do that. But if something's confusing, please let me know. So that is a space. It's a room in our library or an area. I mentioned types of spaces, and I need to move my little head here because I'm not in my fun circle. There are 3 kind of types of spaces when we think about them. The first is a global space. And this isn't like a setting in Confluence. You don't set up a space and call it global. This is more a concept or a way to use a space. Global space is accessible by anyone in our instance. So think of this like maybe a human resources space that has basic policy information. Or maybe every project has a space that's just publicly accessible. Or maybe you have end user documentation that everyone should see. The idea here is it's accessible by the entire organization and is just open. Now, this doesn't mean that anyone can necessarily edit it. So we might have a global space everyone can see, but only small groups could edit, just the people in HR, just the legal department, etc. But it's accessible. And that's a big thing to remember about Confluence. It's intended to get people together. So when we put up restrictions, we want to be careful we're doing it appropriately. And we'll talk about that when we consider what does a space admin do or what other considerations do we have. Another question for the group, curious how your organizations use spaces. Another type of space or way to use them is by team. And I see this very commonly. Maybe the engineering team or department will have a space. And that space will include all of the information that really only engineering needs. Information about API interfaces or what IDE they're using or how to log into GitHub. I'm just making up examples. Those might have sounded very silly. But the point here is this information is very useful to a smaller group, but maybe not to the entire organization. Typically, these still might be very open, but someone on the support team probably won't be too interested in what's going on in engineering. They can poke around, but they have their own space called support with their stuff. Now, another way to do this is by project. And this is where things could get more locked down more easily, more restricted, where you have projects going on. the support team is implementing a new system to support customers. They make an entire Confluence space about that, so they know everything about that project lives in that one space. And they can configure that space differently than their team space for support, or even differently than other project spaces. This allows them to just own their own content and make sure it's all in one spot. So if they do have to restrict it, if it's a super secret project that no one else should know about, it's no other people can get into it. All right, got some responses in chat. Some groups are by teams and products. That's also common. It's hard to figure out dividing by team or project because there's so much crossover. So depending on the size of the organization, you may have a team space and you might not need a project space because the projects could be smaller or there could be a lot of overlap. This is where we want to tailor how we do this. So if we think of a super huge organization, it might make a lot of sense for support to have just their space. But maybe the support team and parts of the engineering team are similar enough. Maybe you have a combined space for them. Or maybe for their project work, you don't have a separate space. You just have a page in their content tree for projects or a folder, and we can do this live. And then in that folder, you have all their projects. So we take the idea of using a space for a project and we shrink it down to just a series of pages in the space for the team that runs the project. One thing to consider about Confluence is what I'm showing you is not the only way to do it or only the best way. It is just a way, and a way that works for most groups most of the time from what I've seen. But if you start doing any of the things I talk about and you're like, this doesn't quite work, or hey, we need to change it, please change it. Confluence is intended, and every system is intended to support our teams and our people. And if it's not doing that, we as the administrators or we as the owners or we as the people using it need to raise our hand and say, hey, we need to change something. So we can tinker with that structure when we get live. Welcome from Nicaragua. All right. I'm going to see if my head is now covering something. And of course it is. Let me fix that real quick. There we go. So creating a space. In my experience, I haven't been able to do this very often. It happens that the organizations I work at don't allow most workers to do this. But creating a space can be very simple if you have the permission. It's just under the space menu. And I'll show you this live as we go. The reason many groups don't make it widely available is because they don't want just anyone making a space. What can happen is you'll have people with really good intentions make a space for the support team. And maybe there's already a space for the support team. And maybe then someone else makes another space for the support team. And over time, you will end up with 6 spaces all called support team or some variation. And it just gets challenging for people to know which is the real one. So as we go through this training, there might be some features or things that I see that you don't. And it's possible your organization has just chosen not to enable them. And that's okay. Our challenge is to understand why the information technology team or whoever owns Atlassian products decided to do that. But I'm always curious, like, who can set up, spaces. Let me know in the chat real quick. Again, when I started using Confluence, I didn't know this existed. I had to file a ticket to get my space. And as we see, I'll do this live. When we create a space, we'll have options for defaulting in things like permissions or even using a space template to make it easier to spin up the space. And my head's in the way again. Run away, Rob. So this brings us to the topic of the training. What is a space administrator? You'll see me abbreviate this as space admin. I wonder if I could abbreviate it further. Spadmin? But a space administrator is someone who controls the space, essentially. And they have extra permissions. They can do things like modify access. And when I think of a space administrator, that is the first thing I think of, and probably what most people think of. Most of my early interactions with a space administrator was, hey, I don't have access to the space. Can you help me? And they would come in and give me access. That, however, isn't all of it. Space administrators can also do things like see more advanced analytics. They have additional tools that they have access to that help them monitor and manage the space. And as we'll talk about, a space administrator's role isn't just to flip switches and turn on access. It's to help guide the space and maintain it to make sure it's still useful over time. But space administrators can also turn off or on features, and we'll see this live as we go. So if you're in a space and you realize something's missing, the space admin may have just flipped a switch and turned it off. Now, I mentioned space admins don't just flip buttons, they're also ideally responsible for doing things like planning the space's development, managing content, onboarding users, etc. So a space administrator's role goes beyond the technical and more to the thought leadership. You are actually owning the space. You are helping guide how it's used and developed. So for me, it's a much bigger burden than just understanding the permission set. It's also about having some idea or vision on what will we do with this space. We've got the support space, but what do I want to see it doing in 6 months? How will I make sure the content in there remains fresh? Now, these aren't features in Confluence, they're processes and ideas that exist outside of it, but they're very important for us as space administrators to keep in mind because many of the complaints about Confluence is it doesn't work. And that complaint isn't the technical feature set is bad, it's I can't find what I need. It's I can't access the stuff I want. It's, hey, where is this page I know exists? Let's see if my head's on the right side this time. Woo! Dodged it. I'm quickly going to check the chat real quick. Did verticals for our own space and blended spaces. Interesting. Space Ace. Carl, I really like that idea. So instead of space admins, we call them space aces. I'm definitely going to steal that. Thank you, sir. So, what can space admins do? I've briefly mentioned this. This is not a complete list. This is what popped off the top of my head as I was thinking through the training. But again, the biggest one that most people think of and what you will probably spend, most of your time doing is setting up and managing access. Now, when we first set up a space, it's going to default in some permissions, and this can be very helpful. But things change and evolve. We need to remove or add people as we go. So we're going to talk about how do we as admins set up access and how do we plan it or think through access to make sure it's proper as we go. Next, we have templates. Templates are kind of pre-formatted structures for a page. I have a whole training on these because I think they're so important. But as space admins, we can create, edit, and remove templates. So we have a lot of power there to make sure our teams are empowered with these resources and know how to use them. But we also have features. We can access features that non-admins cannot. So we have things like mission control that we can go in and look at. We can dig through the trash and pull things out. But our role might also be that mechanical, hey, can you go in and do this thing for me because I can't? But those features also give us extra insight into the health of the space and how frequently is it being updated and who's using it. And as I mentioned, we also provide guidance. When I think of a space admin, I think of someone who has more knowledge about how Confluence works. They have more ideas about what should be done to make it useful beyond, let's put our stuff in there. So I am constantly challenging myself and sometimes failing to provide that leadership for my team. How do I want our team's space to be utilized? And what can we do to improve it? So I've mentioned space permissions, and I'm going to shrink my head here just so you all can see this. Liz, I appreciate all the chat back and forth. And as Liz mentioned, there's lots of correct answers. The way I'm talking about using Confluence is not the only way. We'll talk about next steps and other ways to learn at the end. But please keep engaging and please keep challenging what works to find something that works for you and your team. Space permissions are controllable by the space administrator. And we can control them basically on two levels. We've got individuals, which are users, and groups. Unfortunately, as a space admin, if we don't have what's called org administrator permissions in Confluence, we cannot make groups. This to me is insanely frustrating because most places I work, I'm not the org admin. And most places I work, there's only one or two org admins. So I have to put in an IT ticket to get a group made. Or if I'm very, very lucky, there is some integration that automatically makes groups. But I will talk about groups and their use because as we consider access to a space, if we have a support space and we can go into groups and there's a group that contains everyone in support, I can just add that group and I don't have to think about adding the new hire in support or removing someone if they transfer out. It just updates. There are other types of access though. There are guests. These are folks who are not in our organization but need full access to a single space. Imagine an outside consultant or someone like that. And I believe we get, please don't quote me, but I think it's 5 guests per 1 licensed user. Anonymous access is another thing which allows us to open up the space to anyone on the internet. So imagine you have a FAQ, frequently asked questions document about your app, and you want to share that with the world. You could set up a Confluence space to do that. Or maybe you have release notes for your product, or updates from your legal team, or any other content you want to make publicly available. You can do that with anonymous access. Now, that has to be turned on at your org level, so the instance has to have it, and then at the space level. And it's a little bit dangerous because, again, it's just accessible. So you want to make sure that, thank you, Emily, for checking me there. You want to make sure if you're using anonymous access that it's controlled and that sensitive stuff doesn't go in there. So only a few people can edit, and you're constantly reviewing to make sure it's safe. But that isn't an option. Now, within these permissions for those groups, you can do things like allow them to use certain features. And we'll see this live, but you can see in this screenshot a bit. You might say you cannot add a page. You can just view stuff. Or maybe you can add pages, but you can't add blogs. Or maybe you can only comment, or any other variation of these things. So there's a question, what is confusing about permissions? This is another topic where I have an entire hour training on permissions and restrictions because they are the single biggest cause of Confluence is broken, it doesn't work, I'm confused, I don't like it, etc. that I run into. I mentioned templates. We'll see these live, but as an admin, we control templates. There are things called blueprints, and you'll see them in the bottom half of this screenshot, but these come with Confluence. So when you first turn on Confluence, you're going to have 120 some templates just available. These come from Atlassian and then from other vendors, and they are a starting point, but you can make new ones. Again, I have a whole training on this. I'll briefly show you how to do it, but as the admin, you should step up and say, okay, what is my team commonly doing? My HR team might have a lot of policies, so I'll make a template for policies that is tailored to exactly how our organization does it. My sales team might have to write an after-call report and put that in Confluence, so I'll have a template, so one click, and they just fill it in. They don't have to worry about formatting. We can also turn them off and remove them, so if there's some really annoying ones, you can flip them off or delete them. But we can also promote them. We can have them pop up higher in the list of templates. Again, my goal as an admin is to make the system as useful as possible and as enabling as possible for everyone. So if the templates they need are boom right at the top, that's a huge win. And of course, just educating. I didn't know templates existed when I started using Confluence. If someone had told me, it would have saved me a lot of trouble because I could have made content more quickly. I wouldn't have been fighting with the editor. I could have just clicked a few times and there we go. So letting our team know about templates and how to use them is something else admins really should be doing. I've mentioned various features and we'll see it. Remy, I hope I'm saying that right. The most confusing thing is when you're trying to set up and restrict access to specific pages. Yes. I'll just back up a slide. When we think of Confluence, you'll hear me use the term access and restrictions almost interchangeably. I do my best to make sure I am using them specifically. Access is can you get into the space? And that's what we as admins control. Restrictions are on a single piece of content. That's not access, that's templates. So I'll show you both of these things. Again, I have a whole live training just on access and permissions, Remy. If you can jump into that, because I dig into specific ways to use it, gotchas, things that most people don't know that can be challenging, etc. But I'll cover it at a high level here. There are these other features too that we get access to. Some of these are available just in Cloud Premium. Again, I'll do my best to point them out. But it's things like the mission control, high-level statistics and data about the space. How much new content is there? How much stale content, things that haven't been opened or updated in 3 or 6 months exists. And then turning off and on features. If our team doesn't need to use blogs, get rid of them. Don't clutter up the space. Don't confuse people with the feature. The first place I worked at with Confluence had a Q&A feature. And people would go in thinking, oh, this is where I get help with my paycheck. This is where I get help about my benefits or how do I get promoted. And they would put questions in and no one would answer them. The feature was turned on, but no one monitored it. So these poor people would never get answers. So as an administrator, we have a lot of responsibility to make sure the system is set up with what is needed and used. We also have the very glamorous job of controlling the trash. So if someone deletes something, we can go in and pull it out if they made a mistake. So another fun feature that space admins get. Emily, towards the end, I'll see if I can dig up the access training, but that is a great question. All of the trainings are listed on the same place you all signed up for this if you went through Atlassian Community, but I'll talk more about that towards the end. I've mentioned, being a leader and managing the space, but there's a lot of tips and best practices that I've kind of discovered or just kind of made up as I went. One is to make sure your team knows who you are. I will show you how you can figure out who an administrator is for a space, but most people don't know how to do this. And so when they run into a problem, they just flail and struggle and get annoyed. When I think of people using Confluence, I think 95% of people will go in and just do one thing, make a page, look something up. Confluence is not their job. It's something they use to do their job. It's up to the last 5% of people, the space administrators, the org admins, the super users, to be those champions and to say, hi, I'm Rob. Come talk to me if you need help. So please make sure your teams know who you are and that you can help them out with the space. But also actively monitor things. I'm not saying like keep Confluence open on one screen and stare at it all day, but maybe once a month, go in and just click around. What does it look like? What's been added? What's been changed? What's missing? Challenge yourself to make it better. Pull open the tools I'm going to show you to use them to help uncover these things. But be active in the space. A lot of the time, administrators of many systems will be passive, which isn't necessarily bad. But if we can be forward and get ahead of things and know about what's happening before end users raise their hand at an all hand with 30,000 people and say, why is Confluence broken? That's a huge win. And that's a real story. I was at a very large company, and that was one of the all hands questions that the CEO had to answer. It was very fascinating. Next is just to explore administrator settings. So this training will help you out. I will show you some of these settings, but nothing is really better than getting hands-on. If you need to, you can set up a free instance of Confluence. It doesn't have every feature, but you'll be able to go in and at least see where things are. If your org has Confluence, you might have a personal space, and I'll show you exactly what this looks like. But if not, chat around, talk to your IT team, and see if you can get access to a space that's appropriate or your own space to play in. Most, if not all, of the IT teams I've worked with have been very open to this because basically I'm helping them out. I'm saying, hey, I want to learn how to do this so you don't have to. So my team or this group doesn't have to file a ticket. So by knowing those settings, you're not only expanding your own knowledge, you're really supporting your organization. But also talk to other admins. I'm seeing some back and forth in the chat, which is great. Even questions like, hey, where are all these trainings Rob is mentioning? And thank you so much to my friends at App Anvil for helping me out here. But talk to other people. And I'll talk about other steps and ways you can do this. But within your organization, find other admins and chat with them. What are they doing? What's successful for them? What didn't work? What can you help them with? And tailor your space. When we turn on Confluence, it's a one-size-fits-all. That works 60% of the time. Or the tips I'm showing you, you might try and say, hey, that doesn't quite work. We have to tweak it. Please do that. Make sure the tool fits your needs. Don't try to force yourself into a funny shape because the tool doesn't do exactly what you want. So we're about to get hands-on in Confluence Cloud Premium, and I have a little scenario I have invented. We just got space administrator permissions for the support team resources space, but team members are complaining. They don't have access. Content isn't organized. There's a feature they can't use whiteboards, and they need to do that to build processes. Content's outdated. They have this whole list of things that they can't solve or they need help with. So we're going to jump in to try and figure out, what can we do to help them out while we're exploring all of these settings and features. I probably won't have time to get to absolutely everything a space admin does, so that's why I'll follow the scenario. But please drop in questions if you want me to back up, to dig into something, or go in a slightly different direction. And this is my reminder to teleport into Confluence. So again, we are in Confluence Cloud Premium, and I am in the support team resources space. To quickly orient us, there is a home page. If I click on Confluence, I'll always come back to this page. And under the spaces menu, I can see a list of all the spaces. Now, if I click View All Spaces, I'll see every space that currently exists. And let's say I look at the Robert Heen space, and I mentioned we can always find the space administrator. If you click on space settings, regardless of your access, you'll have the space details option. So if I open up space details, This will give me a list of all the administrators for the space. Now, they are updating the user interface or the UI, so yours might look slightly different, but you want to find under space settings, space details, and then look for admins. Any one of these people has the ability to go change access or to help me out. So if I don't know who the admin is, this is where I go. I go find Rob and I send him a message, or I find him in the office and I say, hi, I'm new here, or hi, I just joined your team. I want to help out. Can I be a space admin? Here's why I want to do it. So here we are back in support team resources. And as an admin and a new admin, I'm just going to start looking around. I want to start to understand the space. I might have been here before, and I'm zoomed in, aren't I? I might have been here before, but maybe things have changed, or maybe I haven't really examined it the way I should. And so all I do is start going down and exploring things and seeing what's in here. Okay, there's a couple, this little icon, little squiggle. There's some whiteboards just floating around. There's a meet the team page. Okay, there's actually, thank you. Okay, there's actually some stuff in here. I can see they're using content statuses, and I might just be keeping a list of everything I notice. And the idea here is just to understand, how is it currently set up? This is like, implementing a new system or making a big change. I want to understand where we are today so I can figure out where we go tomorrow, or what do I want to adjust. So I can see some how-to articles and a process. And they mentioned they can't see whiteboards. And I see page, database, link, and folder. So depending on the size of this, I'll just keep digging around in here. This is a very small space. Most spaces I work in have dozens, if not hundreds of things in the content tree. So this might take a little bit more or less time depending on what's going on. Another call out is this homepage. If you click on the name of the space, please update your homepages. There's a whole future training on the importance of this, but many teams leave this blank. And again, I'm thinking as a space admin, if someone comes to this page, a new hire to the support team, someone who doesn't know what support does, they don't get much information. They might look at this and go, oh, this isn't what I want, and go somewhere else. So I will add this to my list of things to talk to the support team about. Hey team, as your admin, I noticed you don't have a homepage set up. Why is that? Can we change that? Let me help you change that. From here though, I'm just going to open up my space settings gear. And this is where we get more into what people think of as, oh, I'm a space admin. And I'm going to just close the side just to give us some more space. Again, there are some user interface updates. So for example, monitoring and tools might not be there for you. They're rolling out these things. But they've added these 3 tools at the top for space admins to dig in. So right away, I can see mission control, my content manager, and automations. But I also have a lot more options down here under these links. A non-space admin only sees a few of these, mostly for information. Again, who is the admin? That kind of stuff. We're not going to dig into all of these right now. We're going to kind of follow our scenario, but please drop questions with, hey, Rob, what is content statuses, or what is convert space pages, that kind of thing. I'm going to start under space access. Again, I'm going down my mental checklist of, I'm new to a space. What do I need to check on? So this will default to users, or I clicked on users. And again, we've got groups, guests, anonymous, etc. Now, right away at the top, I can copy in permissions from another space. So this would be a great example of if I have a new project space spun up and I have the same exact team and I realize they're not in here, I can just say, you know what? Go copy all the permissions from the other space. Makes it very easy to update. But if I look under this, I'll see a list of all the individual users that happen to have some kind of access. Now, if someone isn't on this list, it doesn't mean they don't have access. It just means they aren't explicitly called out as an individual. Now, what this means, and how I typically see this done, is Rob here might have access to this space as part of a group, but his access might only be to view the space. So, because Rob has to be an admin, I've also added him as a user. I don't want to give the whole group he's in administrator access, so I just put Rob in here as an individual. And this is where when we consider how will we control access, it can be a very in-depth discussion. over some groups just need view or just need comment, but some individuals need more. This is how we can split that off. I'm just going to go down the line of these permissions and briefly touch on them. But we've got the view all permission. A fun question for the chat. If I don't have the view all permission, what happens? So if I uncheck this box for someone, what happens to them? The ability to delete your own content is typically something I see folks having. It means if I make a page and I want to get rid of it, I can. Depending on your setup, you might want to flip that off. So that's something I always check as an admin, who can delete their own stuff, because this could result in a lot of questions for me as the admin. Hey, Rob, can you go delete this for me? But then just going down the line is things like the ability to make pages and whiteboards, the ability to do blogs, comments, and someone mentioned restrictions. If someone doesn't have the ability to add a restriction, they can't lock down a page or remove the restriction. So this is a common source of frustration. Someone will make a page or a database, and they don't have the ability to lock it, prevent someone else from seeing it. This might be why they don't have this specifically. And then at the end, we've got the admin permission. And this is what I have that lets me see all of these settings. And again, shout out to a future training when we'll dig into all of these. I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Heike. If we disable view all, you don't get any access. Correct. So if I go in here, I won't do this to myself. Actually, I'd be curious if I could remove my own access. I won't try it though. If I hit edit and uncheck view all, Rob loses access to the space. Now I could add Rob back just by typing in a name here, search for internal users and hitting add, and then checking whichever boxes they need, or even just saying, you know what, give them everything. And then I can save. The next section is groups, and you'll notice it looks basically the same. The only difference, instead of individuals, it's groups as defined by my org admins. And this is where when we consider our space setup, we want to consider how do we use groups? Because I don't have to worry about, well, I do kind of have to worry about who's in the group, but I can't control group membership. My org admins do this. Hopefully it's automated. So here I might know that the information technology group is just automatically updated with people in IT. So I can just add that group, and whoever gets added to that group gets this access. So for large groups of people, I'll work with my IT team or my org admin to build a group. So this is on autopilot, essentially. Only other thing I'll touch on in here is that external or anonymous access. And again, we want to be careful when this is turned on because anyone on the internet could do something in the space. Typically, I see this done again with a customer-facing knowledge base or a release notes kind of thing. But just be aware that if this is on, people will see some content in the space. So you want to be careful about who can edit or change things. Quick check for my comments if there are any questions. Amit, if someone asks, I need edit access, how do we help them? I'll go back to my users. It's non-intuitive. By that, I mean there's no permission called edit. Instead, you're looking for add. So if someone needs to edit a page, they would need under pages, whiteboards, databases, and smart links. I was going to say that 10 times fast. They'll need the add permission. Similar for blogs. And another common challenge is folks can't comment, and they might be missing the comments permission. But if I come in here and I see that Jan doesn't have the add permission for pages, that tells me, he can't edit or add content. Interesting. Back to my top, I mentioned templates. They live under look and feel. And again, very quickly, just to orient us on here, we've got all these blueprints that come with it. We can turn them off, and I always wrestle with this. Do I want to go through and click this little off button 143 times? Maybe. It will unclutter things a bit, and I'm a fan of uncluttering things. That said, I typically ignore it entirely, and instead I focus on the top, my user-created templates. But this is where I could create a new template by clicking the button. I can unpromote or promote, and then edit or delete existing templates. Going back one. So back to our support team. They told me they can't add, wrong button, they can't add whiteboards. And the reason they can't add whiteboards, there's a features section. And this is a list of all the features that I, as the admin, can turn off or on in the space. And we'll see, where did it go? They changed this again. Whiteboards is turned off. If I turn this back on, right away the team will now be able to use their whiteboards. This is something that is very simple and very easy if you know how to fix it, and will drive your team absolutely crazy if no one knows how to fix it. The feature will just be missing. And this is one reason, an example of why people say Confluence is broken and I hate it and it doesn't work. Well, it does work. It's just set up in a way that you're not expecting. And that's where we as space admins need to step up and understand at least where to look, or at least how to ask the question, hey, why is whiteboards turned off? What can I do? Now, that said, I also look down this list and I ask myself, what does the support team actually use? Do they need blogs? No. Okay. So I always come in here and I turn off the things that I know my team doesn't need. For example, this apps section, I get rid of that for most of my teams. And same thing with shortcuts. And I do that because most teams I work with happen to not use them. And that shows up right over here next to content. It's just something that takes up space and most of the time is empty. So if no one's using it, I get rid of it. I take the 3 seconds to boop, and it's gone. There are some other things in here. I mentioned content statuses. I personally don't work with many groups that utilize these the way as they're intended, but this allows you to set up essentially a workflow in Confluence. So if you realize your team is struggling, someone makes a page and there's a lot of errors on it, or it's wrong, or maybe it needs review, you might start using these statuses. As someone makes a page, they can tag it as rough draft or tag it as ready for review. There is one thing to know about in here in terms of an admin though, and that is the verified status. When a page gets to this status, only an admin or the page owner can change the status. So you might be asked, hey Rob, I need to change this back to in progress. So you might have to step in as the admin and help someone out. All right, team. What other questions do y'all have? Emily's saying, pro tip, you can, yeah. Confluence is very widely used, so jumping in, and I'll talk about this towards the end, into Google and just saying, I need to do blank in Confluence or blank in Confluence doesn't work is a great way to get help. I do that a lot. And again, a lot of what we're learning here is the terminology or the concept that you could go Google. For example, content statuses. I'm going to back up and then go to my mission control. I love the name of this thing. But as a space admin, this is very important for me and very useful. It gives me information about the space. How many new pieces of content have been added? How many people have viewed it? And I can see right away that this is not a very well-used space. That's because this is a demo environment. But it tells you like, hey, is this up or down from last week? What's the trending change? And this will give you a good idea of the health of the space. Something like a support space I could expect to be used quite a bit. So if I start to see activity dropping off a cliff, I might ask myself, is there another space out there? What changed? What is my team doing now that's different? But it also shows me what's turned on. Are guests or public links allowed? Who are the admins? But really at the bottom is where the content gets useful for me. Keep in mind these are all filtered by different date ranges. But it's going to tell me things like how much is content being viewed and what content is being viewed. What are the most viewed pages? And this link will actually show me all of the viewed pages. If I keep going, it's also things like, let me get this in frame for you. How much content is being generated? And by what type? So when I consider my support space, I could expect the team to be going in and adding new articles about new processes or new things they have to do. Or I could expect them to be updating it regularly. So this gives me the activity of the space and is a great way for me as the admin to keep track of the health of things. How is the total content growing? But also then inactive pages and pages without owners. These are two important topics as an admin that I need to consider. An inactive page is basically saying, hey, there's been no change in the past month. Or what percentage of pages are inactive over 6 months? I want to go look into those. Do we still need them? Most people, when they put in content, just put it in the space. And they don't think through, hey, in 3 months I should look at this again and update it. Or they put something in about an event, and then that event happens, and 6 months later, no one cares. So we as admins need to be actively looking at stuff like this to figure out, hey, should we go archive or delete those pages? And same thing for non-active owners. When a page is first created, and I'll just use this one as an example, the page has this owner. If this person leaves the organization, no one is then officially owning the page. This is another process or idea we as admins need to consider. In my mind, the owner is the person who updates the page. Oop, didn't mean to go there. And knows everything about it. If that person is no longer here, who is maintaining the page? Well, as the admin, I can actually change it finally, and I can just type in a different name. So as an admin, I'm very curious, how many pages don't have owners? How many people have left and we haven't transferred their stuff? And last, it relates to your publicly accessible stuff. And again, my giant head's in the way. But things like active public links, and the number of views on your public links. So things to consider if you have that public stuff turned on. All right, a lot of chat. Mr. Jerka19, when I turn off anonymous access and permissions and turn it on only for space. So our space exists in our Confluence instance. The instance itself can turn off anonymous access. So if my instance doesn't have the ability to use anonymous access, my space can't use it. So I might be getting that error. You'll need to talk to an org administrator, someone who has permissions over your Confluence instance. This might be someone in information technology. And that's where it can be frustrating being a space administrator because we can't do absolutely everything. Our team also complained about, in my last few minutes, content not being organized very well. We have access to a content manager. This is showing me just the space structure. But this allows me to see things beyond just the name of the page. I find this very useful. It tells me the owner. So if I realize Rob shouldn't own this, I can go change it. It tells me when it was last active. So when was something last done to the page? Keep in mind it only works for pages right now. They're still expanding it. How many views does it have? And is it using a status? But also labels. We haven't spoken much about labels, and I really need to figure out a better way to bring them up. But these are just information about the page. Most of the time, we should be putting labels on pages, labels indicating what team it belongs to, or what process, or what bug, because it makes it easier for Confluence Search to find things, but also makes it easier for humans to find things. Excuse me. But from here, I can do things like sort just on deactivated owners, or look for just a certain status, or just look by label, or a lot of other things. This gives me a different view of the space that I can then use to figure out, hey, what do I want to do? And if I start checking boxes, I get this nice bar at the bottom that lets me take bulk action. For example, I could bulk archive. I realize, hey, these things aren't needed. I can click archive, put in a reason and just say outdated content. And I can pull them right out of the space tree, but all at once. If I go down the tree, I have to do this one at a time. And we'll notice those whiteboards are now gone. So this is something as a space admin I'm looking at once a month, maybe once every few weeks, depending on the space, just to see what I want to do with the content. And it's honestly something I need to get better at because this is definitely in the maintenance. This is the non-glory. This is not the glamorous parts of running a system, but they're very necessary parts of running a system. All right. I've mentioned the archive and trash, and I'll then jump back to my last slide and talk about next steps. But as the admin, we have access to this content menu that allows us to look at trash or archived pages. I'll start on archive because we just put something in there. I think of the archive as the back room of the library for all the books they don't know if they still need. Or the archive is like the attic in my house where I put things that I swear I'm going to, donate or give to someone else. They're still around. They're just not immediately visible. I'm not tripping over all those old toys because they're in a box in a safe spot and I know where they're at. Things in the archive can still be searched. So there is a way if I go up to my search menu and advanced search, Under more filters, I can look for archived content. This is another example of where, as an admin, I need to teach my team, hey team, if you can't find something, make sure you're looking under archived things in search. You can still find them, but they don't clutter up here. As an admin, I can go in and restore or even delete stuff from here or edit the note on them. So I might say I made a whoopsie. I want to send this back. It will default to going back to wherever it lived. I could give it a different parent, but I can click restore, and then we'll see it's right back where it was. So as an admin, this is another important thing we do, is maintain the space by monitoring the trash and by monitoring archived pages to make sure that we can either restore stuff within a certain time frame or send them back to their home. All right, team. I have a few more minutes. I'm back to my magical portal in the forest, excuse me. Next steps. Again, I know a bunch about Confluence, but I don't know everything. So there are many more places you should go and learn. The first is Atlassian Community, community.atlassian.com. Online forums, all of Atlassian's training is free. There are Confluence-specific forums for questions and sharing things and documents and information. Please check it out. If you sign up, use a personal email. If you use a work email address and you lose access to that work email, you find a better job, you win the lottery, etc., you can't log into Community with that account anymore. So I have a personal account I use. I found that much easier. If I change jobs, I don't have to worry about reaching out to Atlassian support and taking time to fix that. But get hands-on. If you use Confluence in your organization, go play with it. Ask your IT team for space admin access in a safe area that they trust you with. But start to get a feel for it, and get and use the system. It's the best way to learn. All of these trainings are very good, but nothing really replaces you going in and getting hands-on. Also, check out my content. Again, every Thursday, or almost every Thursday, 6 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. UTC. Jump on in. I'll have different topics. And please give us feedback on topics. I'm trying to guess what people will want or what I will find interesting, but we really rely on your questions. Another thing I do, and I'm going to start doing, is posting in the community a follow-up blog with answers to questions. So be on the lookout for those. They'll include links back to this video. We'll put the link in this video, but look up others' content. There's a ton of other smart people out there that will give you ideas and different ways to do things. So it's all about figuring out what works best for you. And then talk to others. I'm seeing that in the chat. I really like to see that. I've made great friends this way. I've had fun experiences, learned a lot of stuff. Please mail me. I really need to change that to email. That is not like paper mail. Please shoot me an email if you have specific questions you want to dig in on. And then I'll see you again in one of these very soon. I'm going to check the chat real quick before I jump off and just see what other questions I might have missed. Celsius Ho? Sorry, I'm just seeing Liz's chat. Isn't Celsius measurement of temperature? I'm seeing a lot of great discussion about APIs, application programmer interface. That is one way to interact with systems, to automate things, or to do things that humans would find challenging or hard to do. All right. Well, thank you all so much for spending time with me. I'm going to put on that wonderful video that I tripped over at the start, just so y'all can see the hard work that the team here does to make this a really good experience. I'm going to skip past the "we'll start soon" though. So thank you again all so much. Please like and subscribe if you liked it and you want to see more. And again, thank you. I really appreciate you coming to learn with us, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you here again in one of these soon.